Hello and welcome back to another episode of Transport Fever 2. We're here in Berkshire County on our new passenger line that is running between Salt Lake City and Houston. And in this video, we're going to extend this line over to connect to the city of Portland, and then we'll be somewhere else on the map connecting another city up to resources. So the plan for extending our passenger line from Salt Lake City to Portland is going to be leaving Salt Lake City, crossing hopefully only 2 points of the river. We'll see how that works out when we start building it, but hopefully we can only need 2 bridges to get across all these rivers here, and then we'll come up, follow along the farms until we reach the city of Portland. And then as for the second portion of the video, we'll be connecting Tacoma to some construction materials. So we will build some quarries over here by this mountain. We'll probably truck them over to a construction materials plant somewhere in this area, and then from there we'll have a train bring those construction materials all the way over to the city of Tacoma. And so let's get started on extending our train line. I think we're going to wait to place our station in Portland until we see sort of where we end up coming in at the city, since we'll probably be following along this river and this road here, but I'm just not sure if we want to come on this side of the city or the river side of the city. We'll sort of have to think about how we would like to extend this line and connect it to Allentown in the far future. And so I think we'll just start over here in Salt Lake City and see where the tracks take us. Alright, and so now we have finished up our tracks. We had to take some cost-saving measures towards the end because we were running out of money, but running through this, we have these tracks coming out of Salt Lake City, and we should probably get a crossover in here quick, so let's just try to get this to work, just like that. And then we did have to go underground here because it was a little tricky with the contour lines. If we take a look here, you can see it actually raises up before it starts lowering down to the river. So we did have to use a tunnel, which I'm not opposed to. It allows the city to then grow over the tracks, and the tracks won't have to act as sort of a barrier for the city out this way. But then coming over here, we were able to just sort of extend that tunnel into a bridge, which does have a good portion of it over land, but again, I think having a bridge like this for this distance is good because it still allows the city to grow underneath it whenever it does get to this side. But crossing the river, we come over with more than enough height and slowly come back down to the ground, where then here, this bridge costed a good bit of money due to the distance. I suppose we could have shortened this and maybe crossed from here to here, and that would have saved us probably $1 or $2 million, but we did have to stick to just one track for this bridge, much like the other one near Salt Lake City. So that saved us some money, and then we'll spread back out to 2 tracks and follow along our roads by the farms, coming through our port area, which we had to redesign for the tracks, and thankfully we were able to get it so that our vehicles didn't have to cross these tracks at all, so that's a bonus. We didn't really want our trucks to have to stop and wait for a train in the off chance that they do happen to line up and cross at the same time. But then continuing on, and then we end right about here, just outside of the city of Portland, with a nice little bus loop, which we still need to connect up to. Now, I decided on the station placement here because I felt that placing it closer to the river really blocks us off for any ports or boat lines in the future, and so I think having it here is good. Over here is not really an option because if we ever wanted to get to Allentown, we would have to climb this hill, go over all of this rough terrain, and then come back down. So I think in the far future, when hopefully we have a lot more money, we'll just tunnel under the city and then pop up somewhere over here, where then we can follow the river and then cut across here to get into Allentown. So now really all we have to do is find our Portland bus loop. We will add a station there. I don't know if we need to necessarily get a second loop in this city yet, but let's take a quick look. Actually, we could probably do that. We can clean up the streets while we're at it as well, since we have some funky intersections and roads going on. So let's pause so the city doesn't break while we do this. Let's see, we'll probably want to get rid of this road. This road needs fixed. That connection needs fixed. And then we can come in here, find our roads, extend these where they need to go. So this makes it much nicer and more clear where the roads are going. We can extend that through, and that's not too terrible. And then I think we can connect this up to the end here. And I think that provides us with a nice loop to start out with. We'll delete that road and maybe this road. Hopefully the city doesn't build those back in, because we do want this hill to be a bit of a barrier for the city, so we don't necessarily want it climbing this. And then I think we'll make one last connection over this way, which we might have to pull that road back a bit and then do something like this. And so now that we have that, we can come through and place our bus stops in a little bit better of spots. So one here, I think we could probably get another one around here. I think at some point I'd like to move this road down to connect here, but there's a lot of buildings in this area, and that would probably run us out of all the money that we have remaining. So for now, we'll just place another stop there, and then we'll get one last stop all the way up here. And so now what we can do is we can make this a loop. So I like how that is. We'll come back and adjust the vehicles later, but we'll come back to our road depot, and I think we'll grab 6 horse-drawn carriages, and then those can go around in the opposite direction. And then lastly, all we have to do is grab this line, manage the vehicles, and duplicate that until we get to about 6 as well. So hopefully this will be able to keep up with our train numbers, be able to bring in and take out as many people as the train will. I believe we can just let this run now and nothing should break. And then the last and final thing we need to do on this line is find this train. We'll manage it from Salt Lake City. We'll come all the way over to our Portland stop, and then from Portland back into Salt Lake City. And this looks like it's routed properly, and that should be pretty good. And then one last thing I'd like to do for this train is we'll edit the vehicle and then just throw on one extra passenger car behind it so we can get just a bit more capacity squeezed out of this train. If we find the vehicle, it should still be able to have its top speed of 28 miles an hour, no problem. But with this extra added car, hopefully once demand starts to really pick up, we'll be able to finally start making money here, since we now have people with destinations for multiple cities. And then I think we'll also redo our bus lines in Salt Lake City, as the city has grown a little bit, and I think there are much better spots we can locate these. So let's grab these, and we'll have one over here, one down here, and then one that comes up this road over here. And then we'll also do the same thing, run 2 loops in this city, and that should cover pretty much everything we need to at the moment. And then the last thing that we'll do regarding this line, I think, is get a second train running, since adding the trip to Portland pretty much doubles the time of the train. So if we can get a second one running and just bump up our frequency a tiny bit, I think that would also help bring in a little bit more demand, just so that we can keep our stations empty then. And now one thing I actually want to do before we duplicate that train is throw in some signals. So we'll really space these out along here just to make sure that the train is very separated so that they don't ever bunch up near one end of the route. And so I think a spacing like that works pretty well. And then all we should need to do now is find our train. We'll let it move a little bit farther down. Once it gets closer to Portland, probably somewhere in this area here, we'll duplicate it so that they should hopefully have even spacing along the entire trip. Alright, and now we can come in and duplicate this train, and we can now move on to our next project and check up on this line closer towards the end of the video. Alright, so actually we just got into 1872, which means we have unlocked some larger horse carriages. So I think I actually want to go through and upgrade our trucks across the map to these new ones, since they do have a higher capacity, as you can see here, compared to the old American horse-drawn carriages that we've had. So if we can go through, upgrade these, I think that'll save us some money in a lot of areas. So I think we'll replace lines like this one, the log line that we have, and other lines like that, to hopefully increase our profit margins on those lines with slightly faster horses, although it's only 1 mile an hour faster, and higher capacity. hopefully that will translate to slightly more money from all of these lines. So we'll come in here and we'll take a look at what our line rate currently is. So 340. We'll come through, replace all of these with a covered horse-drawn carriage. So just like that, and that bumps our rate up to a huge amount. But what that means is we can actually sell a good portion of our trucks and get us right back down to 340 where we were before. So now we're carrying more resources per truck with fewer trucks. So we'll have to keep an eye on how this changes in our finances chart here, but hopefully we'll see this tick up a little bit higher above our expenses. Now here's another line we could do this to. So we're operating at a rate of 300. We can come through, grab these, replace this with these, and then sell a whole bunch of these vehicles until we get back down to 300. Alright, and then the last area that we're going to look to upgrade our trucks is our log line, bringing logs from up here in the forest down here to the sawmill. And we might actually preemptively sell a couple of these just so we have a little bit more money when we do replace them. So I think we'll get this down to about 100 horses, and then we can come in and hopefully we have enough money to replace these. But we do not. We need 3.2 million, so we'll just wait a little bit, or maybe even sell a few more of these. So hopefully we end up with around the same rate of, I think it was 313. And then after selling a few more vehicles, we can afford to replace all those for about all the money that we had. It looks like we're just a tiny bit lower on the rate than we were before, although we might want to let that settle out, but it probably wouldn't hurt to just get 5 more vehicles just in case, because we are planning on expanding this sawmill anyway, so having more logs coming in here wouldn't really hurt us either way. And then one thing I actually didn't think about is we should probably replace our tools line as well, since they share the same road, and the old horses go 1 mile an hour slower, although that's not much. We do need to save as much time as we can, especially with trucks with such low capacity and speed. So I think we will do the same thing here. We'll sell a couple of these trucks, and then whenever we get the money, we can hopefully replace these for just over $1 million. And so we'll come in here, replace those, and I'm not sure what the rate was before on that line, but 80 seems about right. Maybe we could even sell 4 more, and 72 doesn't seem too bad either, so we'll stick with that. We'll see what happens, and we'll come back to adjusting this either later in this video or the next episode, now that we have slightly better vehicles bringing in more resources to the sawmill. Alright, now we can finally begin on our final project of the video, which is getting construction materials over to Tacoma. And I think we're going to end up placing our quarries somewhere up here. I don't really want to put them down here because it doesn't really make sense, and it wouldn't really provide us a challenge since the road would just be a straight shot to the construction materials plant. Now, what's going to be tricky about this route is we'll be bringing stone from a quarry here by truck over to this construction materials plant, and then we'll be going by train into Tacoma. So I'm not really sure how much money we'll be making from this trip over, since the train won't be bringing anything back on the return trip. Now, we could maybe try to figure out a way to have a train come and pick up stone, drop it off, and then take it over, but I think the elevation change and overall terrain is too rough to come from up here down to the construction materials plant. So I think this is just going to be a bunch of point-to-point lines. As much as it's painful to do that. I think we might be at the point where we can do it while just barely breaking even on the line. And then I think maybe in the future we can have some other industries here that meet up at wherever this train station is going to be, which should hopefully really increase the usefulness of that train. We'll just have to see what happens, but with that, I think we'll get started. We'll place down our quarries and get everything placed and detailed. Alright, so we now have this line fully set up and running. We just need to go through and adjust some line rates as things start to filter through. We have our first round of stone starting to come back in, so hopefully we'll start to see how things work, if they're going to make us money or not. But one thing to note, these quarries up here, we will come back and detail those in a later video. We just don't have the money to do all of that terraforming because the terrain is pretty rough at the moment. So much like the other quarry that we did near Allentown, we'll come back and in a later video when we have more money, make these look a lot nicer. But we were able to detail the construction materials plant a little bit, and then over in Tacoma we have a little unload area for cargo. I would like to do a little bit more here, but I wanted to get this line up and running and get some money coming in, since we are starting to cut it a little close in terms of how much money we're making. We are still losing money on our passenger line between Houston, Salt Lake City, and Portland, so we do need to start keeping an eye on that. But here's our train with its first load of construction materials heading to Tacoma. It's one of the newer 280 Baldwin engines, I believe that's what it's called. I would like to get a lot more cars behind it so we can actually make some money off of this train. I just want to make sure it's not losing any speed unnecessarily anywhere throughout this line, and also bump up our stone line rate before we get into doing that. So now one thing I'd like to do quick while we're sort of waiting for things to even out on all of these lines and we start sort of getting a flow going, I want to come into Tacoma and expand the streets before the city starts to do it itself, because it's about to get a lot of resources that's going to pretty much explode the population. So I want to make sure it's expanding correctly as it adds buildings and roads. Alright, and so now, while this isn't exactly perfect, there's still some roads I'd like to fix, but we just simply don't have the money to do that. There is a nice sort of grid set up here that hopefully the city will follow. We just saw it extend this one here, so again, hopefully we'll see that start to work out as the city continues to grow, but I think we're good enough to leave Tacoma where it is as it slowly gets more resources. And we can see here the chart already jumping up from starting to receive these construction materials. And so unfortunately our whole line is going to be limited by Tacoma's demand for construction materials. Now this has been growing. It was at about 60-ish and now it's climbing up closer to 70 as more and more buildings spawn in. So that's promising. We will want to keep this delivery line as ready as possible. So I think if we get this rate up close to 85, maybe even 100, I think might be a good number to shoot for, as there's still plenty more room for the city to grow. We can see there's still more population that the city would like to grow into. So I think if we shoot for 100, that'll be pretty good. And I believe that's about where our train line is at. So yeah, our train line is currently at a rate of 78. So let's come in here and we'll edit this, throw on a few more flat cars. I think 2, that might get us closer. That looks like that brought us up to 91, so maybe 1 more flat car, and we'll stick with that at the moment. And our construction material plant did just upgrade, so we do have room to grow in terms of production. And lastly, this stone line operating at a rate of 129. That's just fine. I think we'll leave that for now. That'll ensure that this station is always full of resources so that this train can make the bulk of our money on its trip. And so let's take a closer look at everything we've done in this video, and then when we come back, we'll come back, take a look at all of our lines that we've adjusted, make sure that those are doing as expected, and talk about what's going to come up next and some future projects. And so now that we're back, we can see here this train is finally moving a full load of resources. So we'll speed this up and see what it's going to make once it reaches the station. We might actually just continue to add cars onto this train, as it doesn't seem to be having issues accelerating up and down these hills. So as long as it's not having issues reaching or being near its top speed, I see no reason why we can't throw on a few extra cars just for the extra money. And this train just dropped off a full load for about 1.3 million, or 1.1 it looks like, and that seems like that will cover its running costs almost pretty much every time. So we'll just make sure that it can get back to the station reasonably near its top speed, and we might toss on an extra car or two just for the extra capacity. Alright, so this train does struggle a little bit here and there along the line, but I think we still have room to get, I'll go with 2 more cars, and we'll leave it as that for the foreseeable future until we have to add a second train to this line. And so let's take a look at all of our other lines and see how they're doing, as it seems like all of our boats are still doing just fine. Our tools line over here is doing pretty well. Our trains are doing very good. I think next episode we might be able to add a 4th train to get to our goal that we had before, since we now have these upgraded trucks going around. It looks like our construction materials line is up there with some of our higher earners. And then we're actually starting to see some of our larger horse carriages up here making us a decent amount of money. Looks like a lot of them are operating around 100,000 plus extra dollars on their trips. We can come in and see this by looking at these charts here. Luckily this log line is now almost never losing us money. Before we were running it at a loss just because the trains were making up for it, but with these new trucks it seems to be doing much better. And I think the same can be said for a lot of our other lines here. It looks like this one just continued to earn more money. It wasn't a huge jump, but any increase is good. I believe it's actually running at a slightly higher rate than before, so we could still squeeze even more money out of this. And then over here, the last one I wanted to take a look at in terms of our trucks. Our grain line, if we increase that, that's pretty much the same thing. It's greatly increased how much money it's making while only slightly increasing costs. And now let's take a look at what's losing us money, and of course our passenger train is still pretty high up there. It does seem to be slowly getting better if we take a look at sort of long-term progress. Looks like we had a period where we actually almost broke even, but we're still just not quite there. If we take a look wherever our trains are, we can get an idea of how full they are. So this one coming into Houston is still only carrying around 25 passengers, which isn't great. We wanted that to be around 40 between each station, just because that would probably cover the costs of the train. And then as for our train going out to Portland, this one's doing slightly better. I think there's more demand between Salt Lake City and Portland than there is between Salt Lake City and Houston, but still 31 isn't really going to get us there. We can see this train has made money on a trip occasionally, but that's probably just one-off because there was a huge spike in demand or something. But we can come in here and check Portland. Yeah, this train station still doesn't have too many people waiting, although the bus stops are pretty busy and seem to be working out pretty well. I just think there's not much demand to be traveling between cities. And so really, I think the only way we can end up making money from a train like this is to simply increase our top speed. That will increase demand between cities, as it'll be much quicker and easier to go to another city to reach a destination. And it'll also cut down a lot on costs, as it won't be so long between stops. We'll be able to make maybe 2 or even 3 trips per financial period. Unfortunately, it's the cars that are holding us back and not necessarily our engines. So we do have to wait until we get better passenger cars, which we might have unlocked some over the course of this episode. Let's just take a look here. And so it looks like we did unlock this car here, which has a top speed of 50 miles an hour. So we might try that out. We can get one of these more powerful engines in here that can go closer to 50 miles an hour, and that might actually do really well. We will have to keep an eye on our costs though, because a train like that would be very expensive. But if we double our speed across this entire line, I think it might be worth it. So speaking of future project and what's going on in the next video, I think that might be something we try, since this train is sort of sucking up a bunch of our profits right now, and we really can't afford it with some of the big projects that we're doing. So increasing or making this train line more efficient, we'll probably experiment with for the next episode. And then I want to get something going on with Pittsburgh here. It's the only city on the map that isn't receiving resources, so we're gonna figure something out in the next video, whether that's just creating some food line around here that will benefit it, or maybe even we take the huge jump and go for machines, although that might be a little tough with how strapped on money we've been. Doing goods or machines is a pretty big investment, so we'll probably just stick with food. However, there's really not a good way to bring food into this city, so I'll think about that sort of off camera between episodes, how we want to do that. But if you guys have any recommendations on how to bring resources or maybe even people to Pittsburgh, let me know in the comments for that. And so with that, that's going to be all for this video. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.